A boy who couldn't sit still in class. A kid doctors said would never focus long enough to succeed at anything. That same kid grew up to become the most decorated Olympian in human history. This is the story of Michael Phelps, and how a diagnosis that was supposed to hold him back became the exact reason he couldn't stop moving forward. Michael Phelps was born in 1985 in Baltimore, Maryland. As a kid, he was restless, impulsive, and constantly in trouble at school. Teachers struggled to keep him seated. He was eventually diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and put on medication to help him concentrate. His mother, a school teacher, refused to let that diagnosis become an excuse. Instead, she looked for something that could channel all that restless energy into something productive. That something was swimming. At age 7, Phelps started swimming partly to keep up with his older sisters, who were already competitive swimmers, and partly because the water gave his hyperactive mind somewhere to go. He hated putting his face underwater at first, but once he got comfortable, something clicked. The pool became the one place his energy wasn't a problem. It was an advantage. By age 10, he held a national record for his age group. By 11, he was training under a coach named Bob Bowman, a relationship that would define the next 2 decades of his life. Phelps' body seemed almost engineered for swimming. A long torso, relatively short legs, an enormous wingspan wider than his own height, double-jointed ankles that let his feet bend further than most people's. All of it added up to a swimmer who moved through water with less resistance than almost anyone else alive. But genetics alone don't create records. What set Phelps apart was obsession. Bob Bowman built a training philosophy around consistency without exception. Phelps trained on Christmas. He trained on his birthday. He trained when he was sick, when he didn't want to, when there was no meat in sight for months. The idea was simple. If you outwork everyone when no one is watching, no one can outrace you when everyone is. At just 15 years old, Phelps qualified for the 2000 Sydney Olympics, the youngest American male swimmer to make an Olympic team in almost 70 years. He didn't medal. He finished 5th in the 200-meter butterfly. But he'd tasted the biggest stage in the sport, and he wasn't satisfied with 5th. A year later, at 16, he broke his first world record. He was the youngest man ever to do it. By the 2004 Athens Olympics, Phelps was no longer a promising teenager. He was a threat. He entered the games attempting something no swimmer had tried, winning 8 gold medals in a single Olympics, matching a record most experts considered untouchable. He didn't hit 8. He won 6 golds and 2 bronzes, a staggering haul for a 19-year-old, but by his own standard, it fell short of the goal. Instead of celebrating, Phelps went back to the pool. The near miss didn't shake his confidence, it sharpened his focus. He and Bowman spent the next 4 years engineering a training program with a single, audacious target: Beijing 2008, and the 8 gold record that had eluded him. This is where the story turns from impressive to unbelievable. Over 8 days in Beijing, Phelps swam 17 races across preliminaries, semifinals, and finals, sometimes racing twice in a single day with barely enough time between them to eat, let alone fully recover. Race after race he delivered. 5 golds came with relative ease, but 2 moments nearly broke the entire chase. In the 100-meter butterfly final, Phelps was in 7th place at the final turn, nearly out of medal contention entirely. In the final meters, he took 1 extra half stroke instead of gliding in, a decision Bowman had drilled into him for years. He touched the wall first by 1/100th of a second. 1/100th. The margin between historic glory and a highlight reel of near misses was smaller than a blink. Then came the 4x100-meter medley relay, the final event of his program. Team USA needed to win to secure the 8th gold. Anchor swimmer Jason Lezak trailed the French swimmer for most of final leg, until, in the last 20 meters, he produced what is still regarded as the greatest relay split in swimming history, touching the wall first by 0.08 of a second. 8 races, 8 gold medals. A record once thought impossible, achieved by a kid who couldn't sit still in a classroom 15 years earlier. Success didn't erase Phelps' struggles. It buried them under trophies for a while. After Beijing, and again after the 2012 London Olympics, where he added more medals to an already historic total, Phelps privately spiraled. He battled depression, alcohol use, and the growing sense of emptiness that no medal count could fill. In 2014, he was arrested for driving under the influence, his second such arrest. He has since spoken publicly about reaching a point where he didn't want to be alive anymore. It was, by his own account, close to rock bottom. He checked himself into treatment. He began therapy. He started confronting the parts of himself that thousands of gold medals couldn't fix. The anxiety, the pressure, the identity crisis of a man who had built his entire life around being the fastest person in the water. Then came Rio, 2016. Phelps returned to the Olympics not as a desperate athlete chasing one more record, but as a man swimming with a clarity he'd never had before. He was 31 years old, ancient by competitive swimming standards, competing against athletes who had grown up idolizing him. He won 5 more golds and a silver in Rio, pushing his career total to 23 gold medals and 28 medals overall. Numbers so far beyond any other Olympian in history that the next closest competitor isn't even in the same conversation. But the real victory wasn't in the medal count. It was that Phelps left the pool for the final time, not as a man drowning in his own success, but as someone who had finally learned to separate his worth from his results. After Rio, he became one of the most visible advocates for mental health in professional sports, using the platform his swimming built to tell other people, especially young men, that struggling doesn't make you weak. Michael Phelps' story isn't really about swimming. It's about a kid who was told his brain worked against him, who turned that same restlessness into the engine of the greatest athletic career in Olympic history, and who then had to learn that no amount of gold could fix what was happening inside his own head. He needed both parts of that story to become who he is. The medals proved what obsession and discipline could build. The collapse afterward proved that no achievement, however historic, can substitute for facing yourself honestly. 23 gold medals. One incredibly human story underneath all of them. If you want more deep dives like this one, subscribe. There's more where this came from.